Few know what really happened in the life of the man who brought Christ himself to life on the cinema screen. The true story of Jim Caviezel goes far beyond the famous interpretation that made him world famous in The Passion of the Christ. Behind the cameras exist secrets kept for more than 2 decades, discoveries that the actor's own family kept in absolute silence, and coincidences so impressive that they seem to have been planned by a higher force. Our exclusive research discovered never-before-revealed details about his childhood, frustrated dreams, the decisions that changed everything, and the mysterious signs that appeared long before he portrayed Jesus Christ. Facts that not even his most dedicated fans know. The first of these secrets began when Jim was just a child in Mount Vernon, Washington state. Jim wasn't simply another one of the 5 children in the Caviezel family. From an early age, he showed an intensity different from his siblings. People described the boy as very intense for his age. There was something in his eyes that caught adults' attention. This intensity manifested in 2 very specific ways. Jim was completely fascinated by sports, especially basketball, where he showed exceptional natural talent. But he also demonstrated a deep connection with religion that surprised even his devout Catholic parents. If you seek to understand the divine mysteries that happen around us, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share in the comments your own spiritual experiences that may connect with what you're about to discover. The first mysterious sign happened when Jim was only 12 years old. During a Sunday Mass at the local church, the priest noticed that the boy remained kneeling long after the other faithful had stood up. When questioned, Jim said he felt something special in that sacred place. His parents initially thought it was just a typical phase of childhood religiosity, but the coincidences began to accumulate impressively. Jim was born on September 26th, a date that biblical scholars consider one of the possibilities for the actual birth of Jesus Christ. Even more intriguing was the fact that his initials were JC, exactly the same initials as Jesus Christ. At the time, the Caviezel family didn't give importance to this detail. Only decades later would they understand the profound meaning of this coincidence. During high school, Jim stood out as a star on the basketball team. His dreams were clear. He wanted to play in the NBA and before that, serve as a soldier at the United States Naval Academy. He seemed to have everything planned for a life completely different from cinema. Sometimes we wonder what exists beyond our physical world, and other times strange things happen that make us question everything we think about life. In such situations, better understanding can mean the difference between staying confused and having clarity. That's exactly what our ebook, The Secret of Jesus' Apparitions, offers. Consider acquiring this incredible material for a symbolic price. This exclusive material offers keys to decipher divine signs and understand how Christ manifests in our days. Your contribution allows us to maintain this independent research work. The link to acquire the material is available in the pinned comment. The 3rd year of high school brought the first major change in Jim's life. He had transferred schools twice, first leaving Mount Vernon High School for O'Dea High School, then to Bury and Kennedy High School. Each change seemed part of a larger plan that wasn't yet clear. It was during a decisive basketball game at Bury and Kennedy that everything changed forever. Jim suffered a serious foot injury that ended his dreams of a professional sports career. What seemed like a tragedy at the time would prove to be the first divine redirection in his life. Unable to dream of the NBA anymore, Jim decided to focus on the military plan. He applied 3 times to the United States Naval Academy. 3 times he was rejected. Once again, what seemed like a defeat would prove to be part of a much larger plan. With his dreams of being an athlete and military man frustrated, Jim found himself at a crossroads. It was during this difficult period that he discovered, almost by chance, an interest in acting. His first experience in cinema happened in 1991, when he got a small role as an airline employee in the movie My Own Private Idaho, alongside River Phoenix and Keanu Reeves. This job earned him his Screen Actors Guild card, but still didn't bring recognition. The most courageous decision of his life would come soon after. Against the advice of family and friends who thought he was crazy, Jim decided to move to Los Angeles to try his luck in Hollywood. He was an unknown young man with no connections in the industry, in a city where thousands try the same luck every day. During his first years in Los Angeles, Jim faced all the typical difficulties of beginning actors. He auditioned for dozens of roles, was rejected for most, accepted small jobs in television series like The Wonder Years and movies that failed at the box office. But there was something different about Jim Caviezel that would soon be noticed by more experienced directors. His natural intensity, that same characteristic that had set him apart since childhood, began to attract attention in Hollywood. He wasn't just another handsome actor trying his luck. There was depth in his eyes that cameras captured perfectly. The year 1998 brought the recognition Jim had been waiting for so long. Terrence Malick chose him to play Private Wit in the war epic The Thin Red Line. Jim's poetic and dreamy performance in the film won critics internationally and finally put his name on the Hollywood map. It was exactly at this moment of growing success that Mel Gibson entered his life. The veteran director was looking for someone special to portray Jesus Christ in his most ambitious project. When Gibson saw Jim in The Thin Red Line, he immediately knew he had found his Christ. But Gibson didn't offer the role immediately. First, he wanted to be sure that Jim would completely understand the weight of responsibility. During their first meeting, Gibson made a warning that would forever change the actor's perspective on his career and his life. What Mel Gibson told Jim Caviezel in that first meeting completely shocked the young actor. Gibson was direct. No beating around the bush. If you accept this role, you'll probably destroy your career in Hollywood. You'll have difficulty getting jobs for years. This warning wasn't exaggeration or dramatization. Gibson knew perfectly how the film industry would react to an explicitly religious movie. He knew that actors associated with Christian projects face systematic resistance in Hollywood. He was offering Jim the chance to refuse even before knowing the project details. Jim's response was immediate and surprising. He didn't hesitate or ask for time to think. "I feel I was called for this role," he told Gibson. "I'm 33 years old, the same age as Christ during the crucifixion. My initials are JC. It may seem like coincidence, but I see this as divine signs." Gibson was impressed with the response. It wasn't the typical reaction of a Hollywood actor concerned with career and money. Jim was talking about calling, about signs, about higher purpose. He was exactly the type of person Gibson needed for his most important project. What Gibson didn't tell at that moment was that he himself had experienced mysterious signs during the script preparation. He had spent years studying biblical texts, consulting specialists, visiting sacred places. During this process, he had also noticed impressive coincidences that seemed to confirm the project had divine approval. From that meeting, Jim's life changed completely. He began intensive preparation that went far beyond any previous role. It wasn't just about memorizing lines or studying gestures. Jim was preparing to represent the most important figure in Christian history. Physical preparation was just the beginning. Jim spent months learning Aramaic, Latin, and Hebrew. These ancient languages would be spoken in the film, a risky artistic decision by Gibson. Many in Hollywood thought using dead languages with subtitles would be commercial suicide. But Jim immersed himself in linguistic studies with total dedication. Even more important was the spiritual preparation. Jim dramatically intensified his prayer life. He began attending daily masses, weekly confession, long periods of meditation. Production team members noticed he always arrived early to the set, not for rehearsals or makeup, but for moments of silent prayer. During this preparation period, Jim began experiencing something he described as internal transformation. He felt he wasn't just preparing to play Jesus, but being spiritually molded for something greater. His wife Kerry, whom he had married in 1996, confirmed that Jim was different at home. The first documented supernatural event happened during rehearsals, long before official filming began. Jim was practicing one of Jesus's prayers when a technical crew noticed that the temperature around him had dropped drastically. Thermometers registered a 15 degrees Celsius drop within a 2-meter radius around the actor. This phenomenon repeated several times during rehearsals. Always under the same circumstances, when Jim went deep into character during prayers or moments of intense suffering. The technical crew initially looked for practical explanations: air conditioning problems, wind drafts, equipment failures. They never found a physical cause for the phenomenon. Mel Gibson initially tried to keep these events in absolute secrecy. He feared that leaks about supernatural phenomena would transform the film into sensationalist curiosity instead of serious artwork. He ordered all team members to sign very strict confidentiality agreements, but the events continued intensifying. During a makeup test session, head makeup artist Tina Castellano noticed something disturbing. She had applied realistic wounds to Jim's face to test different looks. When she turned to organize her materials and returned 2 minutes later, the fake wounds had completely disappeared. Castellano initially thought Jim had removed the makeup, but he was in exactly the same position, with his hands visibly motionless on the table. There was no way he could have removed such elaborate makeup in such a short time without leaving traces. When she asked what had happened, Jim said he hadn't felt anything. This type of incident repeated several times during makeup tests. Artificial wounds that simply disappeared, fake blood that vanished without leaving stains, temporary scars that erased themselves. The makeup team began working with growing nervousness. Gibson made a drastic decision. He gathered the entire main crew and spoke openly about the strange events. "We're dealing with something sacred," he said. "These signs aren't for our entertainment or curiosity. They're reminders that we're telling the most important story ever told. We need to continue with respect and humility." Gibson's speech calmed the crew, but also created an atmosphere of spiritual expectation on set. Everyone knew they weren't making just another movie. They were participating in something that transcended common entertainment. The responsibility was immense, but there was also a sense of unique privilege. Jim began showing subtle physical changes that intrigued the medical team hired for the film. His metabolism had changed inexplicably. He needed less sleep, had more energy, his physical endurance had increased dramatically. Medical examinations couldn't find an explanation for these improvements. Dr. Eleanor Wasserman, orthopedic physician hired to care for actors during physically demanding scenes, carefully documented these changes. "In 27 years of medical practice, I've never seen someone improve physical conditioning so quickly without intensive training," she declared years later. Jim's explanation for these changes was simple and direct. "I feel I'm being prepared for something my normal body couldn't withstand. The crucifixion scenes will be extremely demanding. It seems I'm receiving extra strength to complete this mission." During the final rehearsals before official filming, Jim had an experience he described as final confirmation. He was alone on set, practicing the prayer scene in the Garden of Olives, when he felt a physical presence beside him. It wasn't fear, but a sensation of protective company. When he opened his eyes, Jim saw a human shadow projected on the ground beside his own shadow. But there was no one near him. The shadow remained for several minutes, moving gently as if it belonged to a real person, slowly walking around him. Jim didn't immediately tell Gibson about this experience. He needed to process what had happened. He spent the night praying and reflecting on the meaning. The next morning, he sought out Gibson and related everything in detail. Gibson's reaction was one of confirmation, not surprise. "I was expecting something like this," said the director. Signs like this convince me we're on the right path. Tomorrow we start official filming. I'm confident we'll be protected and guided throughout the entire process. Gibson's prophetic words would be confirmed in ways no one could imagine. The filming would bring even more dramatic supernatural events, but also physical trials that would test the limits of Jim Caviezel's human endurance. The filming of The Passion of the Christ began in Italy with an atmosphere of spiritual expectation, but also apprehension. The crew knew they were entering unknown territory. Few imagined that the coming months would bring events that would challenge everything they thought they knew about physical reality. The first incident happened during the filming of the Sermon on the Mount. Jim was on top of a hill, playing Jesus preaching to a crowd, when dark clouds rapidly formed in the sky. Within minutes, the clear day transformed into a stormy afternoon. The technical crew was preparing to interrupt filming when the unthinkable happened. Lightning struck Jim Caviezel directly on the head. The electrical discharge was so intense that smoke literally came out of his ears. Witnesses described the moment as terrifying and at the same time supernatural. "I was about 30 meters away when I saw the flash," recalled sound technician David Morales. "Immediately after, I saw smoke coming from Jim's head. I thought he had died instantly, but when we ran to him, Jim was conscious and said he felt fine." What most impressed the crew was Jim's reaction after being struck by lightning. He showed no signs of pain, burns, or electrical trauma. On the contrary, he seemed energized inexplicably. The on-duty doctors couldn't find any injury or physical damage caused by the electrical discharge. Gian Michelini, assistant director who was also struck by the same lightning, wasn't as lucky. He suffered minor burns and was temporarily disoriented. For doctors, it was impossible that two people struck by the same lightning would have such different reactions. Jim seemed to have been protected by some invisible force. Gibson initially considered interrupting filming after the lightning incident. It was a sign that perhaps they were taking excessive risks. But Jim insisted on continuing. "I feel this was a confirmation, not a warning to stop," he told the director. "We're exactly where we should be, doing exactly what we should do." The decision to continue proved correct, but also brought new supernatural challenges. During filming of the flagellation scene, an accident occurred that could have caused serious injuries. The whip used by the Roman actors was real, made of authentic leather with small metal pieces at the tips. The whip was supposed to hit a strategically positioned plate to create realistic sound effects without hurting Jim. But during one of the takes, something failed in coordination. The whip passed the plate and hit Jim's back directly, opening a 35-centimeter cut. The medical team ran to attend to Jim, expecting to find a serious wound requiring stitches and filming interruption. To everyone's surprise, although the cut was real and deep, Jim showed no signs of pain. "I only feel a warm sensation," he told the doctors. "There's no pain at all." The cut healed abnormally quickly. In 3 days, it had transformed into a thin line that was barely noticeable. In a week, it had disappeared completely without leaving a scar. The medical team carefully documented this healing process, but couldn't explain how this was medically possible. The second lightning struck Jim during crucifixion filming. This time, the circumstances were even more dramatic. The scene was being filmed outdoors on an authentic replica of Mount Golgotha, built specifically for the film. The sky was clear when filming began. Jim had been nailed to the cross for almost 2 hours when clouds began forming rapidly. The temperature dropped abruptly, and strong winds began blowing. The technical crew was deciding whether to interrupt filming when the second lightning struck Jim on the head. This time the impact was even more intense. Jim's hair literally caught fire for a few seconds. Cameras captured the exact moment when small flames appeared in his hair. But Jim continued acting, as if nothing had happened. It was the most terrifying and at the same time most impressive thing I've ever witnessed. said cinematographer Marco Pontecorvo. Jim was struck by lightning. His hair caught fire. But he continued saying Jesus' words on the cross as if it were the most natural thing in the world. After this second electrical discharge, Jim experienced even more notable physical changes. His cold resistance increased dramatically. During scenes filmed in low temperatures, while other crew members wore heavy coats, Jim remained comfortable wearing only the character's tunic. Doctors conducted detailed examinations to check for possible neurological damage caused by the 2 lightning strikes. All results were normal. In fact, some of Jim's health indicators had improved since filming began. His blood pressure was more stable, his heart rhythm more regular, his lung capacity had increased. During filming of the scene where Jesus carries the cross, Jim suffered another accident that should have caused serious injuries. The cross weighed 68 kilograms and was made of authentic solid wood. During one of the takes, the cross slipped and hit Jim's right shoulder with full force. The impact was so violent that everyone heard the sound of bone being struck. Jim fell to the ground and remained motionless for a few seconds. The medical team ran to help him, certain they would find a serious fracture. X-rays immediately showed shoulder displacement that would normally require weeks of recovery. But the next morning, when Jim arrived at the set, he moved his shoulder normally without showing any pain or limitation. New X-rays showed the shoulder had returned to the correct position by itself, and all inflammation had disappeared. It was medically impossible. Dr. Elena Wasserman, who followed the entire process, declared years later, "In 27 years of orthopedic medicine, I've never seen anything like it. Shoulder dislocations don't correct themselves in 12 hours. There's no medical explanation for what happened to Jim." Jim himself had a simple explanation for these events. "I feel I'm being sustained by a force I don't completely understand. Each accident seems to be allowed only to the point necessary for the film's authenticity, but never beyond what I can bear." In addition to accidents and healings, Jim began experiencing during filming phenomena that the crew described as facial transformation. In certain scenes, especially during moments of prayer or intense suffering, Jim's face seemed to change subtly. "There were moments when I looked at Jim through the camera lens and saw a different face," related cinematographer Caleb Deschanel. "It was no longer the Jim we knew. It was as if another person was looking through his eyes, something very ancient and very important." Maria Gutierrez, production assistant, had an even more striking experience. "I was taking water to Jim during a break when his voice changed completely. It became deeper, with an accent I couldn't identify. He thanked me, but when I mentioned this later, he didn't remember our conversation." These events transformed not only Jim, but the entire filming crew. Many members described profound changes in their own lives during production. Some people who weren't religious began attending churches. Others reported vivid dreams with biblical figures. Mel Gibson's decision to film secretly in Jerusalem was maintained in absolute secrecy. Only a small group of people knew about this final phase of production. Gibson wanted to capture the authenticity of places where Jesus actually walked, but also feared that public filming in the Holy Land would create political and religious controversies. The reduced crew that traveled to Jerusalem included only the most essential members: Jim Caviezel, some camera technicians, the cinematographer, and a few assistants. They arrived during an exceptionally cold week, even by Jerusalem winter standards. Local authorities granted limited permission to film only at night, in areas near the Garden of Olives. Some of the olive groves dated to Christ's time, millennial trees that had witnessed the original Passion events 2,000 years before. It was in this sacred place that the first supernatural phenomenon of Jerusalem filming occurred. Jim was kneeling among the ancient olive trees, recreating Jesus' prayer scene before his arrest, when all artificial lights on set went out simultaneously. The technical crew immediately checked equipment, looking for electrical failures or generator problems. All systems were working perfectly. There was no technical explanation for the sudden blackout. But what happened next left everyone speechless. A soft light began emanating from the ground around Jim. It wasn't artificial light or reflection from any external source. The luminosity seemed to spring from the earth itself, creating a bluish circle that enveloped the kneeling actor. The light pulsed gently, as if it were alive, responding to Jim's movements. "I was about 30 meters away when I saw the light appear," described the sound technician. "It wasn't produced by our equipment. It seemed to come from beneath the earth, surrounding Jim in a blue aura that danced with his gestures. The temperature around him dropped drastically, creating visible mist that moved with the light." Gibson initially ordered all recordings of this event to be destroyed. He feared accusations of special effects would overshadow the film's spiritual message. Only years later did he publicly admit this phenomenon had occurred, stating simply, "Some things can't be explained." That night was one of them. The light remained around Jim for more than 20 minutes, enough time to complete the prayer scene in the Garden of Olives. When Jim finally stood up, the luminosity gradually disappeared, and the set's artificial lights returned to normal operation. During the following nights of filming in Jerusalem, even more impressive events began occurring. Jim developed a mysterious wound on his right side, exactly in the place where biblical accounts describe the wound caused by the Roman soldier's spear. The wound appeared during recreation of the crucifixion scene. Crew members noticed blood coming through Jim's costume, but couldn't identify the cause. When they removed the clothing, they discovered a cut about 8 centimeters long that seemed to have been caused by a sharp and curved object. Most disturbing was that no object had pierced the costume. The fabric was intact, but there was abundant blood flowing from the wound. Even stranger was the fact that Jim felt no pain despite the cut's depth. "I didn't feel it happen," Jim later related. "I only realized something was wrong when I saw people's expressions change." The doctor couldn't explain how this had happened. "Besides, I felt no pain at all. Nothing despite the wound's depth. Instead, I felt warmth spreading from that point throughout my body." This wound's healing defied all known medical principles. In 3 days, the cut had healed completely, leaving no scar. Analyses of collected blood revealed anomalies that laboratory technicians couldn't identify. The cells remained alive much longer than normal and demonstrated healing properties when tested with damaged tissues. The spiritual mysteries we witness throughout history often make us question the limits of physical reality. If events like these awaken your curiosity about authentic divine manifestations, you'll find valuable guidance in The Secret of Jesus' Apparitions. This free resource explores how to recognize genuine signs of Christ's presence in our lives. Available in the pinned comment, but only while supplies last. The most shocking event of all Jerusalem filming occurred near a first-century tomb, similar to the one described in Scripture. Gibson planned to film the resurrection scene in this authentic location, believing the historical atmosphere would give more emotional power to the images. As preparations began before dawn, the tomb was equipped with minimal lighting. When cameras began recording, something extraordinary happened. The tomb's stone facade began vibrating at a frequency that could be felt in the ground. Recording equipment registered the vibrations, but no seismic activity was detected in the region. The vibrations seemed to emanate specifically from the tomb, at a frequency that later specialists identified as exactly corresponding to first-century limestone resonance. Then, as the main cinematographer described, "A light appeared inside the tomb that overloaded all the cameras we had. 4 cameras failed simultaneously, but everyone saw the light with the naked eye. It moved like liquid gold flowing from the tomb's entrance. 3 crew members reported temporary blindness that lasted several minutes. Others described the sensation of electric current running through their bodies. A local production assistant, who identified as a devout Muslim, fell to his knees, later claiming he saw a figure in the light that spoke to him in a language he didn't understand, but somehow comprehended. The events in Jerusalem profoundly transformed everyone present. Marcus Stein, camera operator who had struggled with alcoholism for years, reported that during the light incident in the tomb, he felt something reach inside me and remove the desire. He remained sober since then, describing it as not recovery through effort, but instant healing. The secret filming in Jerusalem concluded with Gibson making a conscious decision to keep all these phenomena secret. He gathered the crew after the tomb incident and said, "What we're experiencing is sacred. This isn't for publicity or profit. These signs are for us, not for promotional material." This explanation reveals why the film's marketing focused on its historical and religious importance, rather than inexplicable events. Gibson consistently deflected questions about behind-the-scenes events, typically responding, "The film speaks for itself." What happened behind the scenes is between those who were there and God. When filming of The Passion of the Christ ended, Jim Caviezel returned home as a completely transformed man. His wife Kerry noticed changes that went far beyond normal physical exhaustion from a demanding production. Jim had gone through a spiritual experience that would mark him for the rest of his life. The first consequence manifested exactly as Mel Gibson had predicted. Hollywood began rejecting Jim systematically. Roles that seemed guaranteed before the film were cancelled without explanation. Producers who had previously shown interest in working with him stopped returning his calls. "It was very sad to see so many people in my country who don't seek holiness," Jim declared in a recent interview. "Instead, they choose drugs and hedonism. Suddenly, I wasn't popular anymore, and not because I did something wrong. I simply played Jesus." But Jim never showed regret for his choice. In all interviews he gave over the years, he maintained the same firm position. "I don't need Hollywood's approval. I don't do it for them, I do it for God. Everything I do is about love, because I want someone else to find that love." Jim's spiritual transformation was reflected in personal decisions that surprised even his closest friends. In 2002, during filming of Highwayman with Ashley Judd, Jim refused to do romantic scenes because they conflicted with his Catholic faith and marriage to Kerry. This decision was seen as eccentric in Hollywood, where intimate scenes are considered a normal part of work. But Jim established principles from which he never again departed. His faith and family became more important than any role or money they could offer him. During the difficult years that followed, The Passion of the Christ's release, Jim and Kerry made a decision that would reveal the couple's true character. They adopted 3 Chinese children who suffered from serious medical problems. 2 of the children had brain tumors, and the 3rd suffered from sarcoma. "They are people, just like us," Jim explained about the adoption decision. This attitude of practical compassion showed how the supernatural events during filming had influenced his daily life. Jim didn't limit himself to talking about Christian love, but practiced it in concrete actions. One of Jim's most notable characteristics over the years has been his consistency of character. In an industry known for scandals and constant personality changes, Jim maintained the same principles he established during the Passion of the Christ filming. Today, at 55 years old, Jim continues married to Kerry since 1996. Their 3 adopted children grew up in a stable home. 2 of them recovered completely from their brain tumors. The family remains united by values Jim developed during those transformative months of filming. Jim also maintains a daily prayer routine he established during preparation to play Jesus. Close colleagues report he still arrives early to film sets for moments of silent reflection, exactly as he did during the Passion of the Christ. the confirmation that Jim will return to play Jesus in the sequel, The Passion of the Christ, Resurrection, announced for 2024, created worldwide expectation. Many wonder if supernatural events will repeat during this new production. When asked about the possibility of mysterious phenomena during sequel filming, Jim responds with the same humility he's always shown. If God wants special things to happen, they'll happen. My job is to be spiritually prepared and give my best to honor the most important story ever told. The lasting legacy of events during the Passion of the Christ isn't limited to Jim's personal experience. Many original crew members report their lives were permanently altered. Conversions, healings, career changes toward missionary work, all attributed to those extraordinary months of filming. Mel Gibson, reflecting on the entire experience years later, made a statement that summarizes the lasting impact. There are things that happened during that production that I'll never completely understand. To this day, no one can explain them. Maybe that's the point. Some mysteries shouldn't be explained, only experienced. Jim Caviezel's life serves as living testimony that some experiences transcend entertainment and become real spiritual transformation. His journey from a young, injured athlete to becoming the face of Jesus in cinema, and then an advocate for vulnerable children, shows how extraordinary events can shape life's purpose. For those who observe Jim Caviezel's trajectory, the question remains: were the events during the Passion of the Christ notable coincidences or divine signs of something greater? The answer may depend not only on what we choose to believe, but on what we're willing to experience when we open ourselves to mysteries that challenge our limited understanding of reality. As Jim himself stated in a private letter after filming, "What we found wasn't just about making a movie about God's love. It was a direct experience of that love, being transformed by it." This transformation continues echoing in his life and work to this day, more than 20 years later. If these teachings awakened your spiritual curiosity, remember the words of Matthew 7:7-8. "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you." The invitation remains open for each of us. The decision to accept it is exclusively ours. If you like this content that helps in spiritual growth, don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to our channel, and participate in our community for more inspiration. Your support with super thanks helps us create more content like this. Participate and stay connected. The invitation to remain open to mysteries, admit that our understanding of reality may be less complete than we think, and understand that the most powerful truths don't always come through explanation, but through experience, remains available to all of us.